the criminal justice system, the people,
Pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care.
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
I'll get to the Trump stuff in a second. I did want to touch on the Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Alito. He, of course, of the many flagpoles and flags that are sending a message supporting U.S. Capitol rioters, supporting a takeover of the United States of America by religious nationalists. All of that is wrapped up in two flags that were flown at the Alito residences. And now the more we find out about the situation with the first flag, that was the upside down flag, the more the Alito explanation, which was, my wife did it, I can't control what my wife does. And as is now said, I can't control what my wife says or does, but I can control a woman's access to reproductive health in every state in America. But apparently not in his own home is he able to handle his wife's situation. But that's a BS story anyway, as we all kind of suspected it was. The more you learn details, the more you see that his wife didn't put up the flag as some kind of dispute with the neighbors. Actually, the neighbors responded to the flag, and that's what escalated the entire back and forth. But leave that aside. The second flag, which was flying at his beach residence, was related to the Christian nationalism. You also saw a similar flag, actually a bigger flag with the same markings, flying at the home of Leonard Leo, he of the Federalist Society. He is a massive Christian nationalist, and it's really his country. Leonard Leo has reshaped America already, and he continues to with his justice appointments that he pushes to Trump. Then they are rubber stamped, and they end up at the Supreme Court and in other seats along the federal judiciary. Now, will Samuel Alito, who finds himself in the middle of all of this, will he recuse himself? I'm seeing, Kim is telling me, in just this breaking news of the day, that he will not be part of any sort of recusal. He says the two incidents do not meet, this is a quote, the conditions for recusal. As I have stated publicly, he goes on, I had nothing whatsoever to do with the flying of that flag. I was not even aware of the upside-down flag until it was called to my attention.
Then did you not drive up to your own house? Or were you staying in the city? What are you doing?
It's such utter BS, but it's just something, right? He just needs to say something. They are weighing major cases at the Supreme Court level tied to the election in 2020, the attack on the U.S. Capitol. They're weighing the claim of presidential immunity that Donald Trump has floated. I mean, absolute immunity is what the Supreme Court is evaluating. And I might say they don't have to rule that the president has absolute immunity, but simply taking the case is slowing things down. So the election subversion charges are undermined, essentially, from a timetable standpoint, just by them taking the case, agreeing to hear the case, examine the case. A January 6th rioter is challenging an obstruction charge filed against him, arguing that Congress intended that law to apply to people destroying evidence, not storming a government building. This is something else that the Supreme Court is going to rule on. So you begin to see all this stuff is right down conflict alley. Alito has conflicts all over the place. The appeal to heaven flag, which dates back to the Revolutionary War, but has become the symbol for Trump supporters. The notion that, I don't handle the flags. Flags are done in a different department. It's absurd. And as I say,
the wife department, right?
The spat with neighbors thing is totally.
I was reading a whole thing on this young couple that I guess, had an F Trump sign on their lawn and got
That's
into a
right.
dispute with Mrs. Alito. They have come out talking about what happened there. And there's a whole article about this. I read it on Huffington Post, but it's all over the place. The couple talked to the New York Times. They say this got really ugly and that Mrs. Alito even spit toward their car. I mean, it's just real sweetheart she is. Yikes.
Yeah, she does sound like a firebrand. Right. Apparently, the C word was exchanged.
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
Yes. By the way, Albert, who just got back from England, they really use the C word over there. It's like a different thing. You know, we use the F word here a lot. You hear the F word. We're kind of an F word. I'm talking about in the world of cursing, okay? In the world of...
we're an F word country and they're
Yeah.
a C word country. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Just for those who are noting it, something that they don't tell you in the guidebooks, that's why we're here. They're a C word country. Doesn't offend the way it does over here. Anyway, the C word was part of the back and forth between Alito and his neighbors. But the story just doesn't hold water. The timing doesn't hold water. The back and forth doesn't hold water. And he still hasn't answered for this other flag, the appeal to heaven flag. Anyway, he has answered for recusal, and he's saying, forget about it. There'll be no recusal. That's the situation breaking with Alito. The other breaking news in Law and Disorder is something that I had said. This had to be the outcome. This couldn't go the way it seemed to be advertised to be going, and that is with Scottie Scheffler. I mean, he gets into it with the cop. He probably was overly aggressive and maybe with tone, maybe driving on when the cop told him not to go past this barrier. And maybe the cop was overly aggressive in his treatment of Scheffler. Or maybe he was just doing his job. I don't know. But no matter what, this couldn't go to court. I mean, it just couldn't. It was begging for an apology. Scottie, apologize to the cop if your tone got out of line. Cop, apologize to Scottie if things weren't handled quite as sensitively. It was 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Don't worry about it. So now criminal charges have been dropped against the world number one golfer, Scottie Scheffler. The Jefferson County Attorney's Office in Louisville saying they will not pursue the case stemming from a traffic incident outside the PGA Championship earlier this month. So they are being dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they can't be filed again in the future.
And I think he did shoot a 6 under that same day, which is very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's how you can tell a real pro.
Unfazed.
Yeah. Shake off that arresting. Let's get back to the tea time. And now to the Trump trial. The 12 jurors who are going to decide this case, they seem pretty sharp. 7 men, 5 women. Corporate lawyer, a woman who called the ex-president selfish. 22 witnesses were called to the stand. 20 by the prosecution, including Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen and Hope Hicks, and David Pecker. He was the guy who was the publisher there of the Inquirer. And the defense rested after just 2 witnesses. They kept talking about, Trump's going to testify. Of course, he didn't. The jury seemed engaged through the weeks of testimony, they say. The summation, the prosecution apparently went on for 4 hours.
Yeah, they laid it all out again.
That's a long course, man.
It's the one thing the defense attorney said was criticizing the prosecution for. He said, get to the point, man.
When Michael Snyder comes in, he's our film reviewer, the Culture Blaster. And he says there's a really compelling movie, and it's 4 hours. But I go, you know what, dude? Stop right now. I'm not going to go see it. I don't care what revelations are there. I think, pacing and management of time when you have people sitting there in a courtroom, it's important. Look, I'm not saying they aren't going to win the case or whatever. I just think guys got to take it under 4 hours. I mean, it's like what's happening to movies in America now. Everything's over 3 hours. There's nobody in the cutting room telling the director, you got to cut out 20 to 30 minutes of this movie. And similarly here, but I don't know that that's really going to matter, as I say. It just is something worth noting.
They had to give up their phones. So there's not going to be any secret video or secret recordings because they all had to cough up their cell phones. I could never be on that jury for that reason alone. No,
a man who lives in West Harlem is in seat number 1 in the jury box. He is the foreman. He works in sales. He was a waiter prior to that. And there's an investment banker who follows Trump, holds an MBA in finance. This is just a kind of snapshot. A corporate lawyer, a California security engineer, software engineer, a civil litigator, a retiree who meditates. These are all your jurors. A speech therapist who lives on the Upper East Side, undergraduate and graduate degrees, an e-commerce executive for an eyewear company, a product development manager. A woman in seat 11 is a product development manager who lives in Upper Manhattan. Her hobbies include traveling and eating. I love it when eating is a hobby. Yeah.
She's a foodie.
Good for her.
A lot of my trips are eating trips, Mark. My whole schedule is based off of the restaurants.
Well, there may be a jury in your future. Apparently, that's what they're looking for in jurors. And the physical therapist, who's worked as a physical therapist for some time, and she gets her news, she says, from the New York Times, USA Today, and CNN. So that's your crowd that will be weighing in on the Trump trial.
Well, they've been deliberating for 3 hours so far. And there are some Trump advisors that say, hey, every minute that they deliberate is good for Trump. One analyst said it's possible that the jury was going to come back with guilty verdicts in 45 minutes. Every minute after that gives some hope for a hung jury.
Wow.
Baby girl, don't even play.
Don't even play with that hung jury stuff.
So we're at 3 hours. So I don't know what that means.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that is the thing. Everybody says, on a jury, there's no forecasting what they're going to do, but you look at things as though there might be something in the tea leaves. And in this case, we look at the length of deliberation, right? They'll definitely have a verdict before Friday. Wouldn't you agree? By end of day Friday. There's no way they're going through the weekend without a verdict.
I don't know. What if there's a hardcore Trumper on there? It only takes one, and then they've got a fight on their hands.
Well, speaking of hardcore Trumpers, I love my celebrities weighing in on things. They feel a call to make a difference. And they're bringing their shimmer, their celebrity shimmer, to the courthouse. Setting up across the street was Robert De Niro. And he was flanked yesterday by 2 Capitol officers, who were there at the Capitol building during the January 6th insurrection or attempt to overthrow, coup attempt, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. And what video we have? Because also in competing celebrity videos, we have, is it Randy Quaid that we have, Albert? Which one do you have ready to go?
We have Dennis. I have Dennis Quaid video. I only have a picture of Robert De Niro.
Okay, Dennis Quaid, not Randy. So Dennis. Yep. Randy's a little more of a complicated picture than Dennis anyway. So here is Dennis Quaid speaking apparently on behalf of those who support the former president, Donald Trump, who's on trial.
What do you think of Trump?
I think I'm going to vote for him.
Really?
Yeah, in the next election. Yes, I am.
Are you ready for the blowback?
Well, yeah.
Which inevitably comes
well,
with Trump.
I think in this election, everybody's got to, I think they're going to take a side or whatever, but it just seems to me, it just makes sense. I was ready not to vote for Trump until what I saw is more than politics. I see a weaponization of our justice system.
Yeah.
and a challenge to our Constitution. People might call him but he's my.
Now, that's a cute thing to say, but he's not just an a-hole, pal. He is a subversive, corrupt, self-centered man who, and self-centered is a polite way to put it, only cares about himself and self-enrichment. And because of that, he doesn't really care what happens from a policy standpoint. Doesn't care about the country, doesn't care about international relations, doesn't care about any of this stuff. So that's why he can say to oil executives, give me money and I will give you the legislation that you write. I mean, that's open corruption before he's even taken office. That's just on the environment and with those oil executives. He also met with other executives in New York City, where he actually, I think they were pharma executives, a lot of them, where he said essentially the same thing. Give me the money, make the donations, and I will give you the legislation. And more to the point, I will give you tax cuts. He was making a point that the tax cuts instituted under his administration roll back at a certain point. There's a sunset clause. So don't worry about a sunset clause. I'm going to give you more in the way of tax cuts. Give me the money. He is open for business all the time, is Donald Trump. That's why his hotel existed. That's why the Saudis, the people behind T-Mobile before the merger, they all spent huge amounts of money at the Trump hotels. They rented out floors at the hotel. It was a way to put money in his pocket. He's an openly corrupt man who had his corruption flag flying in the first 4 years, and it's even more intense in the second 4 years. So that's my response to it. This idea somehow, it's a cute thing to say. I know he's an a-hole, but he's my a-hole.
I agree with Susan. It's really disappointing to hear someone that you've liked in movies, buy this whole they're weaponizing the justice system thing. It's like, I thought you were kind of a better guy than that. What a disappointment. I
mean, I counsel these celebrities in general not to get into this if they're concerned about their commercial viability. But I also understand, and I've said it before, the need they feel to say something, to actually make a difference, to use their celebrity for those things that they consider a higher calling. And so I don't, like at the Oscars and other award show when they make a point about the environment or whatever it might be, I don't begrudge them that at all. I think that that's a decent thing to do, to use your profile in a positive way. That said, I mean, he just seems like he's a low information guy. He's a rich guy who might spark to the cultural wedge issues that they found great success with. But apart from that, I don't get it. Anyway, on the other side of things, as we finish up Law and Disorder, Robert De Niro waiting across the street from the courthouse. I don't know if you can rally that, but I'll just tell you that he's an 80-year-old man, but he's a New Yorker, so he's got that, fighting style. There he is. Here's a little bit of Robert De Niro.
I owe this city a lot. And that's why it's so weird that Donald Trump is just across the street. Because he doesn't belong in my city. I don't know where he belongs, but he certainly doesn't belong here. We New Yorkers used to tolerate him when he was just another grubby real estate hustler masquerading as a big shot, a clown. But this city is pretty accommodating. We make room for clowns. We have them all over the city. People who do crazy things in the street, we tolerate it. It's part of the city. It's part of the culture. But not a person like Trump who will eventually run the country. That does not work, and we all know that.
Okay, so he goes on, and De Niro's been an outspoken, to say the least. I mean, he's been a true critic of Donald Trump since Donald Trump took office. And he has had these vitriolic rants that he has produced in a lot of different forums. This one was across the street from the courthouse. He was flanked by those Capitol Hill police officers. And he felt the call to be involved in the Biden-Harris campaign. He does their ads, and there he was, showing up across the street from the place where Donald Trump is being tried and where the jurors are now deliberating. And that's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.